All right, Guerin Emig of the Tulsa World, along with Kelly Hines. How about this? This is cool. A pleasant transition into a new era of beat coverage with Ms. Hines on the prowl, looking for, looking for stories, staking up Mike Gundy's ranch.
I'm
Do,
doing all
do,
those things. That's
do you
how
know
that's
where
true.
his ranch is yet, Kelly? Have you figured out
No,
where Mike lives?
no, I haven't. But I feel like that's gonna come up at some point. It's great to be back on the beat. It's been a few weeks now, trying to get caught up to speed, but it's been a good time.
Yeah, Kelly is on board. Eli Letterman has shifted duties over to Norman, helping Eric Bailey with the Sooners. Kelly is back in Stillwater, actually moving. She's going to and from Tulsa, Stillwater, making herself familiar, refamiliarizing herself with that drive, which I'm sure she'll enjoy.
I haven't gotten a ticket yet, so things are
You
going well.
oh, there you go. What's the over under on tickets for Kelly Hines by the end of 2022?
I would set it at one, maybe 1.5. I don't know. We'll see. Manford and Yale. If I take that route, that's where they are going to get you.
Is that what do you do? Do you get off the turnpike and go the old route?
So, based on where I live, which is just southwest of downtown Tulsa,
Right.
it's pretty much equal to take the route through Manford, Sand Springs, Manford, Yale, that route than it is to take the turnpike. So I usually go one way and come back the other, just to mix it up. But I don't mind either drive, except for the construction on the turnpike. That's a little bit annoying, but that's apparently always the case. Like, it's been 8 years since I've really driven a lot to Stillwater. And I'm like, weren't they working on this then? I'm sure it's not the same stretch, but it kind of feels like it is. So I don't know, but I don't mind the drive. It's actually not that bad.
Yeah. Well, Kelly has kicked butt on the TU beat for a number of years. I'm sure she's going to do the same at Oklahoma State. She's already written some really cool stuff. Please check it out on TulsaWorld.com. Check out our weekly podcast or the video version on TulsaWorld.com. If you want to just listen in the classic pod sense, you can download and subscribe on Google, Apple, and Spotify. This is really cool. Kelly, you and I get to talk a little bit about what you've seen and heard, what you've learned your first 4 to 6 weeks on the beat. Still fair to say that the tone is optimistic, right? Coming off the Cowboy season and their big win over Notre Dame in the Fiesta Bowl, seems like Gundy has been in a pretty good mood. And even though they've lost Jim Knowles and brought in Derek Mason and have a transition there on defense, they don't seem too worried about that either.
Yeah, no, I definitely felt like even though there were definite obstacles during the spring, particularly with the offensive line depth, that was a big issue throughout that. And that ultimately was why there wasn't a traditional spring game. Despite that, I felt like everybody was very excited and optimistic about this team's potential. Certainly when you look at the pieces on offense and defense, really. But, I think that Derek Mason, I mean, that day that we got to meet him, he just kind of blew all of us away. I mean,
right.
You kind of knew about him, but, to have him like look you in the eye and answer questions and just be so comfortable in that setting and just have really good things to say, really good vibe around him. And it seems like the players really have enjoyed, getting to know him and going through that process. And, what really stuck out about him to me was when Mike Gundy said, he's very low ego, low maintenance. And that's, I'm sure, what you want in an assistant in a defensive coordinator. So I was really impressed with him. He just seems like the perfect fit. Not just for the OSU side, but for him personally, it seems like it's a really good fit. But just really, I think just good pieces on both sides that they have to feel really good about what they can build around those.
Let me ask you if you saw in Stillwater at the scrimmage or the event. I don't know if it was so much a scrimmage as an event, whatever they were calling it over there, that you had a chance to cover for us. Any pieces stand out just in that 2-hour block that you watched this past weekend?
Yeah, I thought that, CJ Tate was a guy I didn't really know anything about, a receiver who's been in the program for several years, a walk-on who had some really good catches on Saturday. Talon Shetron was a guy who, I think those of us in Oklahoma knew some about, but, for him to be a freshman out there making some really good catches, I think it definitely showed that there are really good weapons at receiver that maybe we didn't know that much about, going into the spring and obviously into the fall. So other than that, it wasn't super revealing, but you definitely got to look at the backup quarterbacks. Gunnar Gundy, obviously someone we know some about, but he had some really good throws. He looked good.
In honor of you, I did this in the bedroom because I knew that
it was just
Bella would want to say hi to you.
Hi. I have a kitten around here somewhere, but I don't know where she went. She was acting like she was going to make an appearance and then took off. But the other, the freshman quarterback, Garret Rangel, he looked good too. So obviously that's, people love to talk about backup quarterbacks and given that other than Spencer Sanders, nobody really has any experience and they can't really afford for anything to happen to him. That's a big concern, but also, moving forward, trying to figure out what they're going to do at that position. I know they have a class of 2023 quarterback committed as of a couple of weeks ago, but, I feel like just seeing those guys in that setting, it's a little bit different from like, a traditional practice. There were, maybe 8,000 people there, and it was a different setting for them to sort of showcase what they could do. And I thought they both had some really good throws. So most of the, takeaways from that were on the offensive side. I felt like the defense was very conservative and, they were very careful, trying to avoid injuries, although some do happen and did happen. But, I felt like, just given everything that's back on the defensive side, you probably felt pretty good about most position groups, even without having to see it, on Saturday.
Yeah. The offensive issues are, I think, pretty self-explanatory at this point. They're going to have to find a lead back to replace Jalen Warren behind Spencer Sanders, and obviously they're going to have to find numbers, as you referenced, in the offensive line. Mike Gundy isn't too worried about it because he says there's going to be 25 of those dudes in camp by the time they go to practice in August. Okay, so that shall be continued, but defense is where it's a little more layered, right? Because you're not just looking at replacing guys like Malcolm Rodriguez and Devin Harper and guys in the back end who've either left or transferred, but you're replacing Knowles. We alluded to this a little bit ago, and you're trying to get a feel for how Derek Mason's going to adjust, not just to the replacements in terms of the depth chart, but he's essentially learning the ways of Knowles' assistants. None of those main guys went with Jim to Columbus, Ohio, right, to the Buckeyes. And so it was, I thought the most interesting session of the spring was Mason's 20 minutes with us, in which he not just talked about getting comfortable in Stillwater and with Gundy and with his players and coaches, but how do you put it, sort of deconstructing. Mm-hmm. It was interesting. He doesn't want to necessarily revamp what was so successful under Knowles with all those coaches around, and yet there is a deconstruction and fine tuning that he alluded to that sounded very nuanced and very, very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think he said he took about like 6 weeks doing that, like taking, he referenced how he does this with old cars. He's just a very interesting person. Mm-hmm. They spent all that time taking the defense apart so he could piece it back together. Yeah. And, I never really heard a defensive coordinator talk about that, probably because they're like, oh, I don't want people to know what we do. I don't know. But he was very open about that process and, making sure that everybody was going to be on the same page because, he talked about, verbiage, just making sure that they were using the same terminology. And, even though he spent all that time doing that, he said, 85% of it's going to be the same. It just, man, there's a lot of work to put in for the outcome to be like that similar. But that, I think, just showed how invested he was in just making things run as smoothly as possible and being as efficient as possible, like once it was put back together. So I thought that was really impressive because, like I said, that's not something that coaches are usually that open in talking about. So obviously that's going to pay dividends, once you get to the season. I think that's a lot of work up front that you have to put in, but ultimately I think you're going to see that was time well spent.
I'll say this: it's easy to see why Mason has a reputation for connecting
Mhm.
Players, coaches, program, however you want to put it. That was the case at Vanderbilt. It was the case at Stanford before he took the head job at Vandy, back when he was Coach David Shaw's defensive coordinator, and had to coach against the Cowboys once upon a time in the 2011 Fiesta Bowl. So it was interesting. Former OSU defenders extremely loyal to Jim Knowles. But the relationship, it was out of tough love. I mean, Knowles was as hard on those guys as any coach at OSU was on any other position, right? The little bit we got to peek in at practice, that was apparent. I mean, the volume from Knowles was way above anybody else on the practice field. They respected him, I think, as much. I mean, I'm not saying they didn't like the guy; they liked the guy, but it was respect born out of performance. They knew that if they stayed with him, this was going to work, and they were going to go places. And they obviously went to an amazing place a year ago, never before reached, at least since Gundy's been the head coach. With Mason, you feel that there is a more traditional relationship maybe between coach and player. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. And he kind of referred to the spring as like they're still in the interview phase. I think both ways, still getting to know each other, but just based on what the players have said about him, like it seems like they respect him already, and he just kind of won them over pretty early on. I think it was Tyler Lacey referred to him as a player's first coach, which you hear terms like that a lot, but I really feel like that fits him because I do feel like he's somebody who really wants to get to know his players and values that relationship. And I think with him being not assigned to a position group, that really helps with that.
That's a good point. Right.
I think that I think that's difficult sometimes to be a coordinator and you're coaching the linebackers or whatever. I know it works a lot of the time, but I really like the concept of it not having to be that way, and see what the result is, because you get to know guys from every position group. You spend time during practice with each group. So I like that. I think that that's going to work out well.
Yeah. With OSU football, so much of it is tied to how Gundy presents himself. I mean, that's no different than any other program when it comes to a head coach. But with Mike, he takes some interesting directions, shall we say, depending upon his mood or depending upon the time of year it is. I'll just ask any impressions on the vibe around Gundy from your time just spent holding a recorder in front of him.
Yeah, I definitely feel like just in looking back from whenever I was on the beat before, that was about a decade ago, and I think you can expect any person to evolve over that time. I certainly have, and I think that he has too. And just, I think what really has struck me being back around is, how comfortable he is being the face of the program. And I think that suits him really well, just because of, he's spent a good portion of his life in the program, and, has been a part of, I remember Bill Haston did the numbers at one point, what percentage of program wins Mike Gundy has been involved in as a player, assistant, or head coach. It's pretty staggering. So I definitely feel like he is comfortable in that spotlight, and he's been in a great mood all of the times that I've been around him. And, despite, having all of the issues that, obviously when you're a coach these days, it's difficult to navigate all of the challenges with the portal and NIL and everything that just kind of can be overwhelming. I feel like he has this sort of attitude that, he knows what he's doing, and things are going to work out well. So I've enjoyed being back around him. He's I think, as we've talked about, he's so good talking about big picture things, because he has a frame of reference that's different from other people. So anytime like you ask him about something like that isn't related to like day-to-day like coaching or whatever, I think that he's so good, just because he has opinions that are I think usually pretty valid. So I think he's been good to kind of be back around.
Yeah, perspective is something you'd like to think you stock to benefit you if you've been in the business as long as Gundy has, or been at one school, and it's remarkable how long his ride has been in Stillwater. And you're starting to see that perspective, and it cuts both ways. He's had some challenges, to say the least, along the way. But it is interesting to hear him look back and sort of compare then versus now, and lessons learned or observations made. And I'll say this: at a time where, well, we just got a reminder of this when the Villanova basketball coach Jay Wright decided enough.
Yeah,
60 years old. And there was that would have seemed preposterous, right? Not long ago, just as it would have seemed crazy for Bob Stoops to call it a career,
right,
in his 50s over at Oklahoma. And yet, because of by the second, the landscape is literally blowing up around us when it comes to college sports. I think Rare is the guy who's positioned at Gundy's age to sort of ride it out and do so comfortably. But if anyone is, it might be him, because of how comfortable he does feel, and because, and this comes up almost anytime we sort of lend perspective to Gundy's career and his arc, because he's got an administration now that he's pretty wild about, and he makes that very public in Chad Weiberg and Casey Shrum.
Yeah, I think that has made a huge difference, because there were times, obviously, in the past where it was a bit more, rocky for him. And I felt like in those moments, it wouldn't have been crazy for him to obviously go somewhere else, or, just say, you know what, I'm good. I've made plenty of money in my career. I can, go do, just be a dad and, not do this anymore. Like, that wouldn't have surprised me then. But now I feel like he's so invested because he sees the university is equally invested. And so, I feel like it's a pretty good situation. Maybe the best situation, maybe, I don't know how to compare with previous years or eras, but I feel like things are pretty good right now, and I don't know how it could really, like, realistically be better. Obviously your facilities could always be better, there could always be those sorts of things, but when you see a university president and athletic director who are like, yeah, actually we are going to pay you more because we need to show that we have that level of commitment. And I think that's what, Gundy's most recent raise was really about. It's not always about the money, although money's great. I think just showing that they were on board with him and with where the program is, because, as you mentioned, the consistency, throughout Mike Gundy's time, and certainly now with it being a completely different era than it was even a few years ago, and still to be able to produce at a high level, I think that's really impressive. And that's something that it's not easy to sustain.
Yep. And there is a looming pivot point for Gundy, OSU, and really anyone else in the Big 12 Conference. And that is when Oklahoma and Texas leave, combined with UCF, Houston, Cincinnati, and BYU all coming in. And now it looks like all four are going to be in the reimagined Big 12 Conference a year earlier than we thought. We'll see what kind of fork in the road that creates for Gundy and everyone, but it sets up well. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, for sure.
For all involved in Stillwater. Okay, Kelly, before we cut this off, let's talk a little bit about this weekend. The NFL draft ongoing. Round one we're taping on Friday. That was last night. No Cowboys, Sooners, or anyone in the Big 12 Conference off the board. Wow, gosh, that's got to change, doesn't it? Man, oh man. Specific to OSU, and because not just of what he's done in Stillwater, but the fact he's a Wagner guy who a lot of folks around here are very fond of. How do you think this falls for Malcolm Rodriguez this weekend?
Man, I may not be a day two thing, but I definitely feel like day three is going to work out pretty well for him. I just feel like he has so many things that he brings to the table, not just in terms of ability, but just, really who he is as a person. I feel like there's going to be a team that is just going to love to have him. I know there's so many people in Stillwater and Wagner and really just throughout this whole area that are rooting for him. And we are, I think, pretty biased, but, I think just seeing it kind of reminds me in a small way about, how it was for Zaven Collins. Like you're aware of someone at the high school level and yet they're not getting those opportunities that they probably deserve. And then when they do get an opportunity, they just like making the most of it would be like an understatement. So I think when that happens, it's kind of like what Malcolm's high school coach told me this week. I don't know how anyone could count him out after everything he's done to this point. So I kind of feel that same way. I think once he gets an opportunity, he's going to make the most of it. People can say, oh, his size, whatever. But I feel like you can't always measure some of the things that, are going to ultimately determine whether someone is going to make it at the next level. I've read a lot about, projections, and it's kind of all over the place, but I think that there's a consensus that once this guy gets on a team, he will have a really good chance of making it, making the cuts because of what he brings to the table.
Yeah, no, for sure. And you said it well, that you get to know someone a little bit about what a guy's about. And it's a little harder to do that on a football beat where you've got 100 dudes to keep track of, as opposed to basketball when it's 1/10 that. But there are some that obviously stand out. Collins was like that for you at TU, and he was one of many that you covered there with the Hurricane. Rodriguez, did sort of sparkle that way with regard to not just how he played, but how he carried himself, presented himself. And it's okay to root for these guys. You're not supposed to necessarily root for these guys when you're covering them on the college level as beat writers or columnists. It's okay though to get behind them as they pursue their dreams, right? This is what this is.
Yeah. And I think it really has struck me in the last few years, the first few years I covered Tulsa, there weren't a lot of guys getting opportunities at the next level. And then, things kind of changed there for a few years, and just seeing the guys you covered, for their entire college careers, when you're on a beat long enough or you're around a program long enough, you see them come in and see how they develop, and you get to know them. And then to see them, get really good exposure leading up to the draft, like what happened with David, and there have been other guys, obviously, but to see that happen, and then just hope for the best for them, because you feel like a part of it somehow, even though you aren't really a part of it. Like you feel like them pretty well, and having seen them play throughout their whole career, and overcome oftentimes injuries and just different things, and just knowing their stories. That's something that I don't know that we really reflect on it enough, like just how much how enjoyable that can be when you see them succeed at the next level. And just like seeing Tyler Smith get drafted by the Dallas Cowboys in the first round, like that is incredible. And even though he's someone who is more reserved, and I wouldn't say that I know him especially well, just having covered him during his college career, I just think that is so cool for him and for his family, and for TU. But those are people that you don't really find yourself rooting for them until they're at that next stage. But then you're like, okay, I think this might work out. And just, I'm not really an NFL fan in general, but then I find myself watching games because I'm like, oh, Zaven's playing, I guess we'll turn this on, things like that. So that makes it more enjoyable when you know the people involved.
Yep. Well, we'll see what happens with Rodriguez this weekend. Give one of those, give the kid a shot and let him take it from there type stories, I think, in the works. Let's put it that way. All right, Kelly. Well, it's good to see you. It's great to have you on the beat. I know OSU fans will look forward to reading your material, not just this off season, but obviously when we load back up for football season next fall. Should be a very interesting one for the Cowboys for a number of reasons. It's good to have you back on the grind. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and football season. I know I counted down the days. I counted up the days on Saturday. It was 131 days away. And I'm like, it seems like it should be more than that, because it will be here very soon.
Yeah, we'll be in Arlington for the Big 12 Media Day tomorrow. This is what kind of how that feels. It didn't used to be that way, but this is the news cycle. It's two things. We're getting older, and the news cycle is getting stronger. All right, and just cranking it. So. All right, we'll do this again soon, and we'll talk more about not just OSU football, but basketball and some of the spring sports. I know baseball and softball are really going to kick into a higher gear here very soon. Got a pretty important series with the Sooners, do the Cowgirls next week in softball.
That should be really good.
We should probably talk about that a little bit next week. So until then, listen, have fun, folks. Enjoy your weekends, and keep watching us here at TulsaWorld.com. Keep listening via Google, Apple, and Spotify as we continue to give you the best we can offer in terms of podcasts and multimedia global sports journalism dominance.